afternoon, everyone. Welcome. Good to see all of you joining us. This is a webinar that both Misty and I are keenly interested in and set great store by. We call the topic one of the so-called deal killer avoidance opportunities here, because most of us, quite frankly, are not academically trained in research methods, management, specific aims, measurable endpoints, metrics, statistical analytics, and so forth. So this is an area that is either an opportunity for us to succeed or an area that, quite frankly, if we're not fully prepared for it, we stand a good chance, quite frankly, of being in decline. So it is a great honor for us to have Gillian Wilson, Dr. Wilson. She is Senior Associate Vice Chancellor for Research and Economic Development here at the University of California, Riverside. She also serves as our director of UCR's first multidisciplinary research building. She's also our co-PI and academic champion for the National Science Foundation, I-Corps, and Blackstone Launchpad, and was highly instrumental leading us to become one of the nation's prestigious NSF Innovation Corps sites. She's also guided us in funding several new innovation and entrepreneurship programs. She also, by the way, is co-leading Oasis Innovations, which is an industry attraction proposal to accelerate the validation, demonstration, and commercialization of new technologies. And quite frankly, everybody, that's the Reader's Digest version of her background and her credentials. Probably take a whole hour if I read everything for you. Anyway, Gillian, very great honor to have you join us, and I'll hand the baton over to you and look forward to your talk.
Well, thank you very much, Martin, for a wonderful introduction and for inviting me today. I wish, of course, that that I was there in person, but you know, we have to do what we have to do during the pandemic. Can you see my slides and hear me?
Not yet, Gillian.
Okay, so let's go back.
Now we're cooking.
All righty. So hopefully everyone can see the slides there. And Martin, I'll rely on you to monitor the chat as we go. So again, thank you very much for inviting me this afternoon. What I thought I would do is try to give the 30,000 foot view of the SBIR STTR program, because I know folks have been hearing from different agencies, and I know there are talks going on and lots of details. But I wasn't sure exactly what the background and experience was of the viewers of this talk today, this presentation today. And so I want to just try to encompass all knowledge bases and take that, as I said, 30,000 foot view of even which direction should you start running within the complex SBIR STTR program and all the different opportunities for funding. And then the second part of my presentation is a sort of a general how to do research design, project management tips that I've learned both in my own research experience. I'm an astronomer, research scientist. That's 50% of my time, and the other 50% of my time is the tips and tricks I've learned from working in the Office of Research. So plunging right in, the mission of the SBIR STTR program is to meet federal research and development needs, increase private sector commercialization of innovation derived from federal research and development funding, stimulate technological innovation, foster and encourage participation in innovation and entrepreneurship by women and socially and economically disadvantaged individuals, and foster technology transfer through cooperative R&D between small businesses and research institutions. So an overview of how much funding is available. In the SBIR program, 3.2% of the extramural research budget for agencies with a budget greater than $100 million a year. So we're talking about $3.2 billion in the minimum spend each year to from the SBIR program. And the STTR program, and we'll come to the differences in a minute, but are mandated, the agencies are mandated to disperse 0.45% of their extramural research budget. And that's for agencies which have a budget greater than $1 billion per year. So that's $450 million available from that program each year. So there are 5,000 new awards made every year. So there are lots of opportunities for funding. Of course, the question is, why should you apply and how should you go about applying? The benefits for the applicants are that they have really three benefits. The first is that it's stable and predictable funding. It's not a loan. The funds don't have to be repaid. It's a non-dilutive program. The IP rights are retained by the small business. And technical assistance is given to advance and commercialize technologies for the public good. So what does an SBIR, STTR firm look like? The company must be for profit. It must be US owned and operated and under 500 people. The work must be done in the US and the focus is on performing research and development. It is not purchasing equipment. The focus is not commercializing a technology that has already been developed or one that has very low risk and only needs capita. It's a three-phase process. Phase one is concept development. You're looking at 6 months to a year and funding amounts between $50,000 and $250,000 for phase one. Phase two is prototype development, 24 months here, between $500,000 and $1.5 million available in the budget there. And then phase three, which is commercialization, that SBIR funding is not available for that phase. So differences between SBIR and STTR. SBIR permits partnering. STTR requires a nonprofit research institution partner like UCR. There are differences with respect to the principal investigator, the lead investigator. In the case of SBIR, their primary employment, more than 50%, must be with the small business. For an STTR award, the principal investigator may be involved by either the research institution partner or the small business. You have to check the solicitation in each case. There's a work requirement for an SBIR that you may contract up to 33% in phase one or 50% in phase two. STTR, it's a minimum of 40% small business and 30% research institution partner for the work requirement. We talked about the program size already, so I won't go there again. For the SBIR, some agencies allow majority VC ownership, but STTR, that is not allowed. And then it comes to the number of agencies. For SBIR, there are 11 agencies. I have a figure coming up. For STTR, there are 5 agencies. Be aware that the small business in every case, SBIR or STTR, is always the applicant and the awardee. All right, so here we have a nice color-coded figure showing the SBIR and STTR participating agencies. And you see well, 11 in total, those are SBIR, and then 5 of those colored in green, are the STTR participating agencies. So we have Department of Defense, Department of Energy, Department of Health and Human Services. We have NASA and the National Science Foundation. Before I am going to make some comments on how to choose between all these opportunities, but one thing to be aware of is how much funding is available from each of these different agencies. And DOD leads the way. There's $1.8 billion available per year from the Department of Defense, followed up by the Department of Health and Human Services. 1.15 billion. And then relatively smaller amounts, although not to be sneezed at, $308 million from the Department of Energy, 212 from the National Science Foundation, 183 from NASA, and then 30 million from USDA, and so on and so forth. So next thing to consider is whether your idea is best suited to a grant or a contract. And so here are the differences between a grant and a contract laid out, so you sort of get a feeling for maybe which way you might want to go with your proposal. So grants are much more flexible than contracts. They allow a small business to define a problem of interest in response to a broad topic area released by an agency, So this is the case with Department of Health and Human Services, and also with the National Science Foundation. They are mostly fully grant awarding agencies, at least the NSF is. HHS does have some contracts as well. So anyway, grants are more flexible. The principal investigator has more freedom in defining the scope of the work. They're also flexible with respect to the budget. They cannot be used for classified work, note, and they require best efforts at doing research. They're easier to amend or revise, and any questions and answers about the solicitation are not made public. The application defines the scope of work. Contracts are much more rigid. It's a binding agreement between a buyer and a seller for goods and services. The scope of the work is fairly inflexible. Payments are based on deliverables and milestones. You must use a contract for classified work. It defines the delivery of promised goods or services determined by the contract type. Modification is difficult, must meet strict standards. Questions and answers about the solicitation must be made public. And now notice the big difference. The government defines the scope of work. So here, and the two main contracting agencies are the Department of Defense and NASA. The topics released are very specific and articulate defined problems that need to be addressed. So it's less about your great idea and more about what does the agency want. So I'm not going to go through this slide in lots of detail, but I think it's a nice slide where it summarizes which agencies are contracting agencies, which agencies are granting agencies, and then of course HHS is in the middle. It does both contracts and grants, although mostly grants. So again, DoD, NASA are contracting agencies, NSF, DOE are granting agencies. There are a couple of special designations to be aware of because the government is trying to encourage socially and economically disadvantaged small businesses. There is a special designation, SDB, for that. And there's also a special designation for a woman-owned small business. So be aware of those designations if they could possibly apply to you, because definitely the government, or your case, the government would like to encourage these kinds of companies. Okay, so that was a whistle-stop overview of SBIR, STTR grants and the agencies and the kinds of awards or contracts that their programs offer, plus the kinds of dollars that are available each year from each of those agencies. What I'd like to spend the second part of my talk on is trying to figure out how you go from your brilliant idea to the various steps required to getting your product prototyped and developed. And here we have a very smart fellow who had an idea for a wheel, a device he calls the wheel. So again, how do we get from your brilliant idea? What are my personal thoughts and tips on getting from the idea to the actual prototype, developing your idea? So I'm going to go through, I wrote down, I broke it down into 5 steps: strategizing, proposal preparation, funding outcome, and next steps, whether it's a positive or negative outcome, and then project management. And I'm going to go through those 5 steps one by one, give you my thoughts on those. But my first comment is the landscape for any solicitation appears complex. SBIR, STTR, perhaps more complex than most, because we have the 11 agencies and all of their different restrictions, if you will, their different cultures. So the first thing is not to panic. The first reaction I always have when I'm getting ready to write a proposal is a feeling of mounting panic of, I don't understand this, I don't know what direction to go in. It's all kind of confusing. Can I be successful in securing funding? Well, I'm here to tell you, yes, it's just a case of taking a deep breath and figuring out how to jump through the hoops in each case. You're not alone, you have friends, but we'll go through these one by one. And I'd like to offer some suggestions as to how to get guidance and support, and just some things to think about that I hope will help increase your chances of being successful. Okay, so let's start with the idea. So I think the first thing that's really important to ask yourself is, are you really passionate about the idea? And is it you that's passionate about the idea, or is it just people around you saying, this is a good idea, we should do this? Do you really feel passionate, committed to your idea? Because you're going to go on a path. It's going to be a path that will have obstacles. It's going to be a path where you're going to have to, you know, overcome challenges and gut your way through and figure out how to maybe pivot and put your efforts in a different direction. So for goodness sake, you better be very passionate about what you want to do from the beginning, or it's going to be probably an unsuccessful road. Second question I would ask is, are others working in a similar space, at least that you're aware of? Of course, there are always people working and you may not be aware of their efforts, but are there any others working in a similar space that you're aware of? This could affect your timeline. Do you have to giddy up? I mean, or do you feel you've got this great idea and nobody else has thought of it? That means you might be able to be a little bit more relaxed about developing it and feel that you weren't under quite so much pressure. You could explore some possibilities in your own time and not feel that there was external pressure. The second question is, okay, if there are others working in a similar space, well, are they competition or are they potentially partners? You don't always have to be in competition. It often makes sense to partner with other folks who are thinking about similar things, who might have complementary experience or complementary technical abilities. So think about whether there are others working in a similar space, or try to find out if there are. Do your homework before you set off. And then the third question I would ask is, what is the opportunity cost of pursuing this idea? There are always opportunity costs. You might have 20 good ideas. How do you know which one is the right one to pursue? So you do have to weigh the investment, the time, and the emotion of pursuing an idea versus what else could you be doing in that same period of time. And you should convince yourself that this is the thing you feel most passionate about. This is the thing you believe in. And it's really the highest priority for your own personal time for the coming weeks, months, and if you're lucky, years. So, okay, you've convinced yourself you want to go down this path. Now you've got to strategize a little bit about funding opportunity. You can make a lot of progress without any funding, but of course, if you get funding, you can get more resources, you can go faster, you can pay people to help you. It's a lot easier journey to have funding. So where to begin? So for any solicitation, find your way around the landscape. Learn which agencies fund different technology areas. And there's an example of a website there where you can type in your topic, your area, and you can start to look and see which agencies might possibly be potential funders for your particular area of expertise. Here are some examples. So before I plunge into these 4 examples, be aware that more than one agency could have a funding opportunity. It's not like you have to match exactly your idea, your innovation to one agency. Be open to where you might be able to get funding. Although I would counsel, try to build a relationship with try to settle on one agency and one funding opportunity. Don't get spread too thin. Try to build a relationship with that one agency first. And then, of course, you can expand perhaps to seeing if you can get funding from more than one agency. You can't be funded for the same work from more than one agency, but you can be funded from more than one agency to do different kinds of work. So here's an example. If you are a vintner, you have a solution for black rot, perhaps USDA or NSF might be your funding home. You have an idea for augmented reality. Well, maybe it's DOD, maybe it's Health and Human Services, or maybe it's NASA. Physician, okay, maybe it's HHS, maybe it's DOD, maybe it's NSF. Or you're a postdoc and you've got this wonderful idea for high temperature alloys. That could go to the Department of Energy, it could go to Department of Defense, it could go to NASA, or it could go to NSF. So you really have to do that work of searching the different agencies and searching their opportunities to try to find out where the right fit for your idea might be. Now, you have to put, my advice is to put in a lot of work here in the beginning to try to make sure you've got the right fit. And the way to do this is you can find details of funded proposals on the agency websites. And I do strongly encourage, that's what I do whenever I'm looking at a funding opportunity. I go to the website, I read the solicitation, and if it's a solicitation for a program that has been funded in the past, I try to get copies of I try to get as much information from the website as I possibly can. So you can get a title, you can get abstract, you can get who's on the team, how big is the team. You can get an idea of the dollar amounts that are given for in that field. So you can try to shape your proposal so that you're applying in the sweet spot. You're not asking for too little funding for your idea, but you're also not asking for too much funding so that it's probably dead in the water because 3 other proposals could be funded for the amount of money that you're asking. So try to find a sweet spot for the funding you're requesting as well. But you can get good ideas and you can certainly begin to understand whether your idea is in line with what the agency is looking for. I've got quite a lot of writing on these next 2 slides, but I kind of wanted, it's more writing than I've preferred, but I wanted to put down something about the different missions and cultures of the 2 agencies. I touched on this before when I was talking about contracts and grants, but this is important as you try to figure out where the right home is for your idea. So DOD and NASA, as we discussed before, are both contracting agencies. They're often referred to as mission agencies. This means that these agencies are the ultimate customers for these agencies are the ultimate customers for the solution. And those solutions are often part of an integrated system purchased from a prime contractor. So your solution is a cog in a wheel of some giant apparatus that NASA or DOD are working towards. So you have to look very carefully at the solicitation topic and look for the phrase, here's an example, Navy component of DOD, acquisition program toward the top of the page. This refers to the DOD program that ultimately will acquire a solution should the DOD decide that the need is persisting through your development. in the solicitation topic, the problem is described in a lot of detail. And importantly, the performance metrics of interest are noted. What needs to be accomplished in phases 1, 2, and 3 is also specified, and there's a list of references. So the agency is laying out very, very clearly exactly what they want from you. So to be responsive, you can't simply propose a project. Oh, I've got a brilliant idea for energy harvesting, an energy harvesting system. What you have to navigate is that what you actually propose to these agencies, these mission agencies, must provide a specific solution to the problem as they define it. The other kind of agency is a granting organization, and they have a very different culture. HHS and NSF, they are never going to be a customer for the technologies that they're funding through these programs, the SBIR or STTR programs. But the research areas that they are supporting through these programs are aligned with their missions and with the greater good. So they're expressing loosely the genesis of the need, and they give examples and suggestions regarding the desired benefits. But you get a lot of latitude as the applicant with respect to defining exactly what the problem is and how you will bring the solution. Note that since these granting organizations will never be customers for the technology, to assure that there is a commercialization path, the proposer is expected to provide more attention to commercialization than is typically required by the contracting agency. So that's just another nuance, but an important difference between the different kinds of agencies, the granting organizations and the mission agencies. Okay, so you've done your homework. Now double check your conclusions. Seek guidance from experts, whichever experts you can get guidance from. Some agencies, the program officers are allowed to talk to you at all times. Some agencies, the program officers are never allowed to talk to you. Some agencies, the program officer can talk to you in a very specific period of time before the solicitation comes out. If you can speak to a program officer, that never hurts, because you could be thinking, oh, I've got this perfect fit to this solicitation, and just a few minutes of conversation with a program officer, and I'm speaking from experience here. I have experience taking faculty to talk to program officers in DC, and they tell me afterwards, oh, that was just a wonderful, even 15 minutes, because the program officer said, oh, no, you're misunderstanding what we want from the solicitation. Your idea is not what we want, but here's another solicitation over here, that's a better fit for you. Or they may hear, oh, that's a really exciting idea, please write it up quickly and send it to me. So if you can have a conversation with the program officer, that's almost always helpful. I'll tell you, I've been funded for NSF research grants, and I've never had a conversation with the program officer. So it's also not essential, but it can be very helpful, even in stopping you investing weeks, if not months of your life in writing a proposal that is going to miss the mark as far as the funding agency is concerned. So I said seek guidance, I really mean it. Seek guidance from colleagues, from anyone you can find who may have experience in writing these kinds of proposals, who can give you constructive criticism. You don't want to ask someone and they just say, oh, that's wonderful, and they don't give you any kind of constructive criticism. You also don't want someone who's so negative who tells you you'll never get funded, this is all a waste of time. You want someone who's actually giving you feedback that's honest and is helpful and strengthens your proposal. In seeking guidance, I also included UCR's Office of Technology Partnerships there. They are a resource from the community. They have a huge amount of experience, and they are there to help you navigate your way through this process. Last and not least, the most useful thing I think you can get is examples of funded proposals. They're not always easy to get if you don't know anyone at all who's had a proposal funded. Then you're shooting more in the dark. But if you can find someone who has ideally a proposal being funded, even an unfunded proposal can be useful, just to get a feel for, you know, what do these proposals look like? How did they lay out their ideas? What level of information had to be provided? How do the sections look? Tremendously useful, can get you up to speed. And you know, if you know anyone at all who's had a funded proposal, they're funded, they don't care, they're usually quite delighted to share with you how they were successful, as long as they're not a direct competitor, of course. So this slide is all about not wasting your time. The time put in strategizing, doing your homework, talking to people, studying, is so that you then don't waste weeks, if not months, writing proposals that are not funded. That's no fun. It's exhausting to write proposals. If you are writing a proposal for an agency and they're looking for a pentagon and you're a triangle, you're not going to be funded. So you need to have a lot of confidence that it is a triangle that the agency is looking for, and you can build a great yellow triangle and be successful in applying to that agency. Now I'm going to come to what I think is the most important part of being successful in any endeavor, which is the team. If you find yourselves in an unhappy team, it will be an unhappy experience. So if you have an opportunity to have influence over the selection of the team, that's a good situation to be in. You want to choose people that you believe are technically competent, but they have all those extra social skills, enthusiasm, they have the willingness to work hard, they have the willingness to rip something up and start over, they have the willingness not to just criticize and gripe, but to actually say, hey, that's right, we're on the wrong path, we can do better, let's start over, let's work together and make a stronger proposal. And ultimately, I believe the team is what will make you successful in developing your prototype and being able to market it. As part of the team is the very, very important question, will you PI? You may be thinking of being the PI, but you have to ask yourself honestly, do I have the right skill set to PI? Do I have the right temperament to PI? Thirdly is, do I have the time to PI? It might be that you have an opportunity to join a team, but you just don't have time to lead it. You're happy that somebody else takes the lead for one reason or another, but you yourself just don't have the time or the inclination or the talent to PI. So these are soul searching questions, but it's best to ask them earlier rather than later so that you can be honest about your strengths and weaknesses. You can be honest about what the team needs, and you can try to find the right kind of people to build a really strong team that complement each other. Slide here on important facts to remember. Oh, sorry, I'm seeing some questions here. What does PI stand for? PI stands for Principal Investigator, Leader of the Project. And somebody's asking for Silva is asking for copies of funded proposals. Martin, maybe we can come back to that.
Sure. Yeah, I'll just interject, Gillian. Yeah, we certainly do have examples of proposals, which give good examples of study approaches and so forth. Just reach out to either Misty or yours truly, and we'll help you there. Okay, thank you, Martin. All right, so just some things to bear in mind. Eligibility is determined at the time of award. The lead person, the PI, is not required to have a PhD or an MD. You do not have to have a PhD or an MD to be the leader. Although I will counsel you, ask yourself if you're the right person to be the leader for other reasons. But you are required to have the expertise to oversee the project scientifically and technically. You can, and I touched on this earlier, you can submit applications to different agencies for similar work to support different aims and objectives. And there's nothing wrong with doing this. There's nothing wrong at all with doing this. You'll probably have to write the proposal a little bit differently to fit the culture and the solicitation from each agency. But if you have an opportunity to be funded by 2 or 3 agencies, there's no reason why you can't write a proposal or submit a proposal, resubmit a proposal to a different agency. But be aware that awards, you can't be funded for the same work from different agencies. So if one of the agencies comes through and funds you, that means that your other proposal is automatically dead, or at least the part of the proposal for which you proposed the duplicative work is dead. You will not be funded for that part. It is possible to be funded for some other component of the proposal that the first agency did not fund you for. And this happens in my field quite a lot. I and my colleagues will apply to both the National Science Foundation and NASA for funding for our research. And it can be, in many cases, quite similar research, but we can't be funded to do the same research. That's double dipping, and the federal government does not allow that. Now, of course, there's a time cost and energy cost in applying to multiple agencies. So my advice, if you're starting out, you're just starting to try to get a funding track record, is to really focus in on one agency. Try to figure out which agency is the one that's most likely to fund you, and try to learn their culture, respond to their solicitation, and not get too distracted by trying to apply to 3 different agencies at the same time and being successful with none of them. Just kind of figure out where you feel your home could be, and build a relationship with that agency that you think is the best fit first. That would be my advice. Okay, so we talked about selecting the team. So in writing a proposal, before you even start, you have to understand how the proposal is going to be evaluated. You're writing a proposal, and the agency will have some quite tightly defined boxes for how that proposal will be evaluated. And the reviewers will be asked to score your proposal in these boxes. So here's what I'm talking about. So significance: does the product address an important problem and have commercial potential? Is there a market pull for the proposed product? The approach of the proposer: are the design and methods well developed and appropriate? Are problem areas addressed? Are potential pitfalls and alternative approaches provided? And I'm going to touch on this a little bit more in a slide or two, but does the approach give the reviewer confidence that the money isn't just going to be wasted, that the team has a good plan for making progress, even if and when they encounter obstacles? Innovation: you're scored on how novel is your technology or product, and the approaches proposed to test its feasibility. What is its competitive advantage? You know, are there 10,000 other apps out there to match a student with a tutor? Is your app going to have a competitive advantage? So now down to the personnel. Are the investigators, the collaborators, and the consultants appropriately trained and capable of completing all project tasks? It might be a great idea, but if you don't have the right team, you're not going to make progress. Does the scientific environment contribute to the probability of success? Do you have access to facilities if you need access to facilities? Do you have independence? And of course, a very important component is the company's business strategy, one that has a high potential for success. So the overview is simply that the proposal will be scored with the reviewers looking at these different criteria, and you'd better be looking good in all of the criteria. You don't have to be perfect, but you have to be compelling in each of these criteria in order to be successful. So you better have a plan to discuss each of those areas. People always tell you this, but I'll just say it again. Start early. You are likely to have to go back and redo various sections. What you write down you might not be happy with, but at least you wrote something down and you can go back and polish it and pass it around and ask people for feedback. You have to determine your goals, sometimes called specific aims by NSF, and your deliverables. You should sketch out a straw man proposal. I certainly always do this. I don't just start on line 1 and write for 15 pages and it's done. Kind of lay out what your different sections are going to be, what you want to say in each of those sections before you plunge into trying to write them, and also lay out how they're going to fit together so that there's a coherent whole. I definitely recommend developing a timeline for proposal writing and delegate the task. I mean, hopefully it might just be you writing the proposal. Sometimes it is. Sometimes you're the only person who has the time or the talent for writing it, but hopefully some other members of the team can help, at least in writing some sections or preparing figures or so forth. So you have to figure out how to make that all go together and have a timeline. Did you hit your checkpoints for getting the different sections together by the certain time? I would say it's essential to include a project schedule, also known as a Gantt chart, which is a fancy way of saying a timeline of who will do what when. I'm going to show you an example. This is an example of a project schedule from one of my own proposals. This is one of my NSF research proposals, so it's not an SBI or STTR proposal. You can get lots of examples on the web of how to lay these things out, but this is just an example I'm showing, which shows the timeline. This was a 3-year proposal, and showing when data would be gathered, showing in different colors which institution would be responsible. UCR's doing the pink, UC Irvine's doing the blue, and Kansas, excuse me, Kansas University is doing the green. And then this is the timeline over when the tasks will be done. And then in this case, the deliverables are papers shown there in red. And so we write down what our deliverables are, what those papers are, and when they will be delivered. So I'm just showing this as an example, but you are going to want something similar. And again, there are many examples out there, but something similar in your proposal, giving confidence you've thought through the different steps, the different milestones, and you have a good idea for how long each part, task that you're proposing will take. Okay, so now the whole concept of being successful with a grant, a proposal, I call them grants, but of course contracts here too, is that you're trying to walk this tightrope. You're walking this tightrope. You're trying to convince the reviewers that your idea is innovative, but not too innovative, right? If it sounds too risky, it's pie in the sky, they're going to believe it's not going to be done. And so you're doing this tightrope walk with your team, and you may be the donkey at the bottom, or you may be the lady sitting in the chair at the top, but whichever role you play in the team, you're trying to convince the NSF that what we have is really cool, but it's not only cool, we'll be successful at it. We have a good vision, we have good plans. It's not so risky, we're all gonna fall off the high wire and we're never gonna get to the other side. So you don't want to, so it's always a little difficult. Contingency plans are good, but you also don't want to give the impression that you will not be successful with plan A. So you have to kind of be finessing that of, here's plan A of how we will be successful, but here are some things we've thought about that might be challenges, and here's what we'll do if we encounter those challenges. All right, make your ideas stand out. This is really important. If you've ever served on a review panel, well, it's a bit like this. You have many proposals to read, and they kind of blur together. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to get the reviewer excited about your proposal, your idea, right at the very beginning. Because once they formed an impression, that's very rarely changed. So you want them to be excited right from the get-go. You want to pay particular attention to what you write in the project summary and the first page of proposal. So that when they read that project summary and they're reading the first page, they're excited. They're like, oh, this is really standing out. I want to fund this proposal. Of course, the rest of the proposal has to be good. But if you write a poor or dull project summary, you're going to lose their attention very quickly, and the chances are you're not going to get funded. So pay particular attention to the first part of what they see in your proposal. Figures, good figures are also important. You know, a picture's worth 1,000 words. So if you can convey something, especially in a nice color figure, that can really help your chance of getting funded. Okay, don't spend weeks writing your proposal and then fail to get funded because you did something silly, stupid. You should have just paid more attention. Study and follow the rules. Here are, sadly, reasons why proposals fail. Missed submission deadline, too many pages, failed to complete registrations, exceeded budget limit. Don't fail for a silly, simple reason. All right, here are some feedback from this is NCATS actually, from the agencies about reasons proposals do not get funded. The significance wasn't conveyed. Either it was an unimportant problem, or it was not conveyed that it was an important problem. There was an unconvincing case for commercial potential or societal impact. An inadequately defined test of feasibility, a lack of innovation, a diffuse, superficial, or unfocused research plan, questionable reasoning and experimental approach, failure to consider potential pitfalls and alternatives. That was the point I just highlighted. Lack of experience with essential methodologies. This is speaking to the core experience of the team. Unfamiliar with relevant published work. Unrealistically large amount of work proposed. So don't propose too much for the funding amount you're requesting either. Don't promise the moon if it's really not feasible to deliver the moon in 6 to 12 months. My last point here is, again, here is a really important time to seek feedback on your proposal from as many experts as possible before submission. This is the point where you can get really good critical feedback, polish your proposal. People may catch a point that wasn't clear, you didn't make clear, or that you failed to convey a step, an important step. This is the point where you have read your proposal too many times. You need to give it to other people so that they can read it and give you hopefully constructive criticism. All right, then you submit it on time, within the budget, under the length requirements, and then it's gone. It goes into the ether for several months, and then you learn the funding outcome. Now, of course, ideally you've done everything perfectly and you're funded, but if you are declined, and you can look up the acceptance rates of each agency, so you can get a good idea of what the acceptance rates are. And I'm going to guess the acceptance rates are something like 20%. I'm going to throw that out there. So you've actually got a 4 in 5 chance that your proposal is declined. I would say this happens a lot. Don't be discouraged to be declined at the first attempt. Of course, I want you to be successful at the first attempt, but if your proposal is declined, don't just throw it down and stomp away and say those people are idiots. You know, really approach it maturely, seek feedback, try to digest that feedback, and learn from that feedback. Sometimes you get a review or a reviewer and it really is nonsense, but usually when you calm down and you think about what the reviewers have written more rationally, you accept that there's some truth in what they did say, and you can improve your proposal. So you have an opportunity at this point to tweak or pivot your proposal if necessary. Rejection is painful. Discuss the summary statement if you can with the program director. Be open to the critiques. Be constructive, not defensive in your response. I mean, you're doesn't help to be too unpleasant to the funding agency. Consider reapplying, but do think about, is that the right thing to do? And I put try again in question mark, because maybe you've realized that you were very wide of the mark. It was the wrong agency. It was the wrong solicitation. Maybe you find there's another idea you're more enthused about. So think carefully about whether you want to try again or not. How do you want to spend your time? It's usually worth trying again, at least once or twice more. If you've failed 3 times, I'd say you're probably barking up the wrong tree. But it is not unusual to get funded on the second or third try. So do not be discouraged if you don't get funded on the first try. However, if you are funded, that's even more scary, because now you actually have to do the hard work. So now we come to project management. So I would say before, great, you're funded, you're excited, you're ready to go. But now it's probably been something like a year since you wrote your proposal, or you started thinking about your proposal. It's a good time to review the landscape again, and understand whether your aims that you wrote in that proposal are really still exactly what you want to do and what you think will lead to success. Review the proposal goals, perhaps even review the personnel. You may have found that you have not enjoyed working with some people that you started out on the journey with. You may also have realized that you need some extra people, some new people. So review where you are, take stock. You want to develop a more detailed timeline of what you said. The project, I showed you the Gantt chart there earlier, but you actually want to dig in a little bit more, develop a detailed timeline, and checkpoints. This is really important. If you're not making your checkpoints for what you want to do in the first 20%, you're unlikely to get right to the end, 100%. So you got to have checkpoints, and you got to be willing to prepared and willing to make adjustments continually to make sure you get down the path to the end. Now we come to what I think is, and I said this earlier, the people are the most important thing about the whole endeavor. If you're in a great team, your first idea might not work, but you can pivot. If you're in a great team, they're smart, you'll probably think of something else to do, and it will still be successful. Things can get unpleasant in teams, and so it is important to be super vigilant about and make sure that you have clear communication, that you build and maintain trust with your teammates, and if there is conflict, you work to address that conflict in a constructive way. Don't let things fester. I've worked in happy teams and I've worked in unhappy teams. And the unhappy teams tend to come apart and be unsuccessful. So I wish on your journey that you may be part of a great team. I like this quote, I'm going to put it here. When you ask people what it's like being part of a great team, what is most striking is the meaningfulness of the experience. People talk about being part of something larger than that. For many, their experiences as part of truly great teams stand out as singular periods of life lived to the fullest. So may you be part of a great team, and may others get out of your way and let your innovation roll. And you might want to not be the guy sitting on top of this prototype wheel. But anyway, thank you for listening, and I hope you got something of value for the hour that you gave me.
Dr. Wilson, terrific. Thank you so much. Great advice from someone who's been there and done that many, many, many times. That's for sure. I was hoping that I would not be the one at the bottom of the wheel, at the bottom of the hill, just in case the project did work well.
That's the person getting in the way, Mark. They should get out of the way. They were there with the clipboard. There's always
okay, that's a solution. Got it.
Roll that wheel off that hill.
So anyway, your point about how to handle being rejected a first time, which many of us experience, is yeah, that happens quite a bit, quite frankly. And we're fortunate enough to get reviewer comments and so forth. But quite often what we've discovered is that they might get feedback, reviewer comments with perhaps maybe a week or so before a next submission deadline is there. And I'm sure you've been there many times. So we have many people who say, well, yeah, well, I can quickly address all these reviewer comments because half the time they don't really know what they're talking about anyway, and they're all wrong, and they want to turn something around and resubmit. Do you have any thoughts on that? Is resubmitting, is speed the best way to go, or would you maybe say, at least in some cases, if not all, maybe we ought to think about this a little bit and wait for the next submission
Yeah,
deadline?
so that's a great question, Martin. I would say if you can find out, so there are some solicitations for which the review panels are fairly static. The people who will review your proposal next time around may be the same people who reviewed it the last time. There are other review panels where the composition, the people change every time. If there's a way to find out which kind of review panel your proposal is going to, then I would say that would direct your strategy. If you're going to, if your proposal, your resubmitted proposal is going to be reviewed by almost entirely different people, if not entirely different people, then they will have a very different impression of your proposal, perhaps, than the first committee. But if you know your proposal is going to go back to the actual same people, you definitely have to address their concerns.
Got it.
But if you know it's going to a different committee, a different panel, they may have a whole different set of concerns. So if there are some things that are not clear and you can fix quickly,
right,
that's the impression you get. Of course, then it is reasonable to resubmit quickly. But you do have to ask yourself that question. If they called out serious flaws, then maybe it, almost certainly would be advisable to slow down, take time to properly address those flaws, and then resubmit.
Got it. Jessica asked Dr. Wilson, you had mentioned the terms novel project and technical risk, and you had discussed those. Could you explain what they mean respectively, and what actually is the agency looking for when they say we're looking for a project that is novel and has technical risk, I guess, and so forth? These sound like National Science Foundation terms, but I'm sure other agencies use the same thing. What's your definition of both? I
mean, again, you should try to get a clear definition from the website and the program officer. But a novel project is you're doing something new, innovative, exciting. Nobody's done it before. As opposed to you're doing something that maybe is making incremental progress on what somebody else has done. So is it really something that's exciting, that's original, that will transform the world? Or is it something that might help a little bit, make some improvements, but it's not going to have the amazing impact that something like the World Wide Web had? And technical risk is okay, you have an idea, but you've got to convince the reviewers that your idea, when you're developing the prototype, it's actually going to work. There's always a risk between, I developed this new material, and I can make that material work when I connect it to other things. I can make it work with the properties that I believe it has in a small component, or on paper, theoretically. Mm-hmm. When I actually build it, is quantum mechanics going to play with me, and it's not going to work as I think it should? Something else is important.
Sure. Great. Kat has another question, Dr. Wilson. So Kat's team is waiting. They appears they have already submitted an NSF grant proposal. It's their first, phase 1. They're curious, and this I guess happens to all of us. We think of new things, we learn new things about 2 seconds after we press the submit button. And during the time it takes during the course of review, response, and so forth, they've probably learned a lot more. And Kat was wondering, should they, can they, is there a way for them to let them know what they've learned, what other additional findings and so forth in the 4 months or so since they wrote and submitted the grant? Is there a way for them to do that, or maybe that's just simply is not allowed?
I'm not aware of a mechanism for
Yeah.
doing so. They kind of the door comes down when you submit your proposal. The door comes down, and then what you've written at that point is what goes to the reviewers. There is not a way that I'm aware of where you can write what you've learned in the months since you submitted the proposal, other than you put it in your next proposal.
Exactly. We've learned the same thing, Kat, is that to make certain that you very carefully record your findings post-submission of the proposal and be prepared to include those in your next submission if you need to. Kieran, I wasn't ignoring you on purpose. Dr. Wilson, Kieran's a client of our EPIC SBDC here, and he's got a platform that he is working on. It can support multiple tools. Wondering if he should apply for agencies respective to each one of those different tools. And Kieran is working on geolocation solutions and so forth, by the way, relative to the platform. Any thoughts on multiple agency applications relative to tools that would be provided on a single platform? Does any of that make sense?
I don't know the short answer to that. This is one of these more subtle strategy questions that you kind of have to think about. If he can get funded, I would say if he believes he can get funded for any one of his tools, go for it. If any one of them is a standalone project, a standalone proposal that could be funded, then go for it. And in that proposal, he can write, here are the applications beyond what I'm asking for funding for in this, very specific, contained, well explained application.
Sure. Yeah.
But I think that's one of those gray areas. Do you go big or go home, or do you say, well, I'll do it in stages, and I can do this one stage and I can do another one stage? And maybe Martin, you yourself might have a better might want to jump in and answer that when you've maybe seen things like this before.
Yeah, and I'm familiar with Kieran's proposal anyway. Typically, we are suggesting that you submit the entire platform to a single agency, and we have in prior agency discussions during the course of the week, agencies do indeed collaborate and co-fund. We've discovered that as well. That being noted, we for the most part, Kieran, and what we have been working with you on so far is reach out to a single agency and then take it from there.
Good. Kieran has his answer, and I'll just jump in and say, agencies like to co-fund because it means they are asked to disperse less funding themselves, plus they're sharing a risk with the other agency. So it's actually something they like to do if it's possible.
Sure, terrific. And from Juana, first of all, I should say, read this great presentation. So you got 2 greats for your presentation, Gillian.
Well, thank you.
Terrific. So thank you for that. But here is her question, and it actually pertains to a lot of us, a lot of folks who prepare a proposal. So what happens if a year passes between submission and the award?
So if if you get the award, you're golden. You don't have to worry about resubmitting. You got the award. And then that's the point where you have to do that, you know, looking in the mirror, looking at the external landscape. You got the funding, so you're able to do something. Then the question is, okay, you wrote the proposal with the best of your knowledge a year ago. You've got new knowledge, you've learned more things, you've probably developed your prototype a little more. You just have to ask yourself, honestly, is what I wrote a year ago still really what I want to do? Or do I know more now in that I'll do things slightly differently? And again, if it's a grant, you have much more flexibility to say, I'm building on what I submitted a year ago, but I've got some new ideas. I'm going to go in this slightly different direction. If it's a contract, you're more you're tied to the terms of that contract, so you don't have that level of flexibility.
So to carry that further, Juana also says, well, you know, since the time we submitted and the time that we actually received the reward, your advice well received, of course. She also, I'm assuming here, has learned a lot, continued her research and so forth. So her question is, should we go forth with the original proposal, or should we make revisions? And I would probably insert, these are my words, not Juana's, by the way, have a conversation with the program director and say, we have new findings. I wonder if maybe we should make adjustments to our proposal and our study relative to those findings. And forgive me, Juana, if I misinterpreted that.
So if they're minor adjustments, the agency doesn't care. And I know NSF best. If it's minor adjustments, the agency doesn't care. They trust you to use your judgment. If they're major adjustments, you need to have the conversation with your program officer. If you can articulate the reasons for the changes, I would think they would be very receptive, you know, as long as it's still a project that has a likelihood of success. Again, I don't know the details of what the adjustments might have been. In Juana's case, you may have more details. But I think if it's major adjustments, you probably do need to talk to the program officer and explain what you're thinking and why. But if you have quite a lot of flexibility, and really, if it's NSF, you really have quite a lot of option of forging the path that you see fit.
Yep. Yeah, that makes sense to me. So here's another one from Silva, Dr. Wilson, and I'm going to paraphrase Silva's. It's a kind of a long-winded question, but Silva has a life science company. They're collaborating with a Chinese laboratory. And let me insert my own comments. We do have others who are thinking of submitting a proposal, but they have laboratories in the PRC, India, South America, and so forth. How should they refer to, number one, her comment? She's concerned about our current trade war. There's China bashing trend, per her words, and so forth. But how should she refer to Chinese collaboration? And for me to expand that a little bit further, how should we handle collaboration with non-US research labs and so forth? Number one, is it possible to do that? And if so, what would be the conditions for same?
So I'd just like to preface my answer by saying, as you may have gathered by the words I have spoken, I am non-US born myself. So I have a great deal of sympathy for those by accident of birth who end up in different places around the world and are just doing their best to do great science. I also have colleagues in China and collaborating with colleagues in China. So I'm very aware of how international collaboration and people bringing diverse ideas really drives innovation. And it is always interesting to me that so many entrepreneurs seem to be foreign born. That's just something that I've noted. So coming back to the question in hand, you should absolutely not consider not working with a colleague or a laboratory because they happen to be based somewhere geographically. What you do have to be very careful with and very aware of is transparency and full disclosure. So when you are making statements, when you have to fill out your paperwork, so being very, very transparent that you are not double dipping. I mean, some of the concerns are that endeavors are being funded both by the federal agencies in the US and by China. So you're having to be very careful that you are disclosing all the activities and that everything is above board. It's not that you can't carry out endeavors with Chinese collaborators. It's simply that you have to be super scrupulous about filling out the paperwork, jumping through the hoops, making sure you're following the disclosure rules, so that if what you're doing is subject to scrutiny, you haven't fallen afoul of any disclosure rule or any lack of transparency. That's what I would say. I actually sat in on a presentation about this earlier this week. The US government is not trying to discourage collaboration with China. They are trying to encourage ethical research. So by ethical research, I mean folks carrying out research with the best of intentions, and as they call it, with US values.
Got it. Thank you for that. So this from Marcus goes to the first part of your presentation relative to SBIR phase 1 in general. In phase 1, how much is research and how much is commercialization? And I realize that answer can be specific per agency, but what's your experience on that?
I think you're better placed to answer that than I am. Sure. So I'll pass that one to you.
All righty. I'm happy to answer that one, Marcus. It's research, emphasis, proof of concept, feasibility, phase 1 prevailingly. Phase 2, Marcus, is making a seamless transition to demonstration of efficacy. That's where we pay much more attention to our commercialization plan and its execution. So you probably see that a lot of the support that the agencies provide relative to not only the derivation and development of a commercialization plan, but its actual implementation comes toward the completion of our deliverables. But commercialization, for the most part, is funded or supported in phase 2. So Jared, again, Dr. Wilson, great presentation. So you're a star here. So Jared wants to know preferences, I guess, for contracting versus granting agencies. Jared's project states that lends itself to a granting agency, but wants to still cultivate a relationship with a contracting agency, for example, the Department of Defense. Is there a good way to go about doing that early on? Do you have any thoughts on that, insights?
Yes, and I strongly encourage you to build relationships with as many agencies as you think might be interested in your work. So with DoD, I mean, there's no reason why you can't identify the program officer that you think would be the most closely related or most interested in the kind of work you do, and reach out to them to ask to have a conversation. If you have a quad chart that you could provide, that would be useful. But if not, there's absolutely no reason why you can't start multiple conversations, even though you feel that the DoD might not be the right funder at this point in development. They will be able to guide you. They will be able to direct you to other program officers if they feel that there's something in what you're describing that could be of interest to the different, to those other areas within DoD. So don't be shy is my short answer.
Sure. And
again, it's not like NSF has its own friends and DoD has its friends.
right.
You can talk to all your friends. You just can't get funded by two different friends to do the same piece of work.
Yep. And Gillian, I can probably tackle these two from David, but
yeah, go ahead, go for it.
But I'll throw it out to you just in case. David says, once we receive study section panel reviews, a rejection, once David and his team address those comments and are ready to submit, should David submit adjustments as a supplement to the full proposal or submit a totally new proposal? Our answer is David, there is a special section in your resubmission when you were responding to that calls for you to address each one of the study sections, or that is to say the reviewer's concerns.
So it depends on the agency, but I think we're talking NIH here.
Yeah.
So yes, you're answering for me there, Martin.
Yeah, so it's a full proposal. And second question, David, submitting changes to a full proposal, he wants to know, are you at the end of the review process line, or do the reviewers just make a decision on the new information? My experience is that the resubmission goes into the same pile, so to speak, and I'm stating that crudely. Do you have a different take on that?
No, same pile.
Okay. So, so David, in other words, even though you have responded to reviewer concerns, you are in the same crowd when you're submitting your revised proposal. Kat, your question is, how long in advance of submission deadline should we submit a draft to UC Riverside to help us review? Well, I can tell you, for the most part, about 24 hours to 48 hours before the deadline submission, I'm the most popular human being on earth. I am on my knees begging you to don't do that, okay? We can't help you if you submit something with just a day or so to go, all right? As early as you possibly can to our team, especially yours truly, give your sections to me part by part, and we'll go over those with a fine-tooth comb, okay? Don't wait until the last. I've gotten to the point where I just unfortunately have to reject being able to help anyone if I get something just a couple of days before submission deadline. There's nothing we can really do for you there. So a word to the wise, Kat, give them, reach out to us, communicate with us, work with us as early, I'm talking about months in advance.
Martin, is it useful to have Kat and others reach out to you and say, I'm thinking of responding to this solicitation, this is the deadline. I will get a proposal to you, I will get a straw man or a rough proposal to you by X date and a full proposal to you by Y date? Would that, something like that, be useful to you?
That most assuredly works. Straw man is fine. What we like to do is to get a reach out as soon as possible. We'll start working with you. And in fact, a good way to do that is for us to go over the straw man and outline, discuss your aims, discuss your endpoints, how you expect to design your study approach and so forth early on. And then we'll work with you on content. Typically, the most successful ones are the ones where I go over every word, every paragraph, every chart, every graph, with you, and we go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And my mantra is, you can take the pain and torture from me, or you can take a rejection from the review committee. The choice is entirely yours. So reach out to us early. Dr. Wilson is spot on. Get to us straw man, or get to us pre-straw man, and we can roll up our sleeves and move forward. Okay, if a project fits another agency, is there any reason to consider the more general grants from the NSF as an alternative? Do you have any thoughts on that before, or I'll jump on it as well if you
I'll
want.
just jump in and say, no, there's no need to consider writing more grants than you have to. It's simply that if you need funding, you need resources, and you have not secured resources from your other agency, it doesn't hurt to get resources from, and I don't like to think of NSF as a fallback agency, but it doesn't hurt to get resources from NSF to be able to develop your idea, your product more fully, and be able to go back to the agency perhaps with some pilot data that would be more convincing. Martin?
Yep, absolutely. My suggestion, however, is also get to know the other agencies. The reason why Misty and I organized this 2-week conference was to introduce you to the agencies that might be a little bit more esoteric, much more refined in terms of their research interests and so forth. Many of the agencies you may not be familiar with at all. That's why they are here this week and next week as well. Highly encourage you, and we will work with you on that, to consider all of the other agencies in addition to the so-called Big Five. And the Big Five are here, of course, this week and next week as well. But as I'm hoping that you all learn, those of you who have attended the agency presentations heretofore, or here to date, that is to say, you found out that they probably are in a position to prospectively seriously consider your proposal, your innovation and so forth, that perhaps you had no idea that they would do that. So we'll work with you to take a look at all of the other agencies in addition to the catch-all National Science Foundation. And Kat, I just reach out to them. I'm not sure what you're talking about in terms of a chart. Maybe
Is it the Gantt? I was referring to a Gantt chart.
Oh, yeah, the Gantt chart.
Okay.
So use the example that Dr. Wilson used. We also have several other examples of Gantt charts. Happy to share those with you. And terrific. Gillian, just a bunch of thank yous. So you must have done.
Thank you for organizing it. Again, I hope it was useful, and I wish everyone success. It's not an easy job to.
Nope.
It's one I think to be creative and successful as an entrepreneur is an incredibly difficult job, and I admire those who can see their ideas through to success. Good luck to you all.
Well, Dr. Wilson, very much appreciate it. Thank you very much for giving us an hour and a half of your time. We learned a lot, and we sincerely appreciate it. So
best of luck with the rest of the conference.
Yeah,
it sounds like it's off to a wonderful start. I'm hearing only good things.
Well, we have 540 who have showed up. So there is indeed confirmation that there is interest here. So, and it's because of people just like you, frankly. So,
well, I'm hearing there's an opportunity for a hybrid conference in the future. Even when there's an in-person conference, there may be opportunities to have attendees who can't travel in person, who can use some of these technologies that have been developed for remote participation.
Most assuredly, the hybrid can be a blend of what we did last year, which was bricks and mortar here on campus and here. So yeah, hybrid probably will be the way to go henceforth. So
yeah, that's a great number, 540. Wow.
Yep. Terrific. Thank you so much. So before we close for the day, unless you wanted to tackle it, Misty, I wanted to encourage you all to join us tomorrow.